Good afternoon, everyone. For some of you, this beautiful Monday. It's the afternoon here in Ohio. Those of you that are joining us from the West Coast might be having your lunch, having a late or even a late breakfast. But we are excited to welcome you to today's webinar, Beyond the Hype. AI as a strategic partner in student housing. So before I turn it over to Pete, a couple of things I will put in the chat some information on some of ACUHO-I's upcoming program. We have the One Symposium this week, the Live-In Symposium on April the 8th. We still have a couple of spots in our Mid-Level Leadership Institute mid-April, our Small College and University Symposium later in April, and then our big event, Campus Home Live, which is going to be in Orlando, Florida, June the 21st through the 24th. So I will put that information in the chat. As you have questions, if you will utilize the Q&A feature, then we will have some time at the end, hopefully for a couple of questions. And if not, then we'll gather that and get the information out to you with a copy of this recording. We are recording this webinar. So I'm going to turn it over to Pete Trentacoste, and Pete is the Executive Director of Residence Life at LSU and our resident expert for the day. So take it away, Pete.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody, and I'm super excited to talk about this session. As I think about a moniker for why AI, I used to call myself just an on-campus living evangelist, but I have to add AI evangelist to the evangelical nature of what I talk about these days. It's a super exciting topic, and I think it's very timely for us to be talking about this as a profession. And so, without further ado, I'll kind of jump right into the session. And I want to talk first a little about my bio. Like I could talk about how I came up in the field and it's important for me often to make the connection to say, why is this guy who's executive director of residential life at LSU talking about AI? And did he just suddenly decide to research this? And the truth is, no, I've really always been a bit of a techie. I've always done a little nerdy stuff with tech back in the day. And what's funny is AI actually helped take my resume with a couple of thoughts and build this. And today, our presentation is brought to you by Google and Notebook LM, and we can talk a little bit later about some of the beautiful work that LM can do for you and your work. But these slides, it's my intellectual property. However, Notebook LM is the one that made these beautiful graphics that you'll see throughout the day today. And so you'll see that on the bottom right-hand corner of these slides. But back in this, like I started on a Commodore 64 back when I was a kid. And so that dates me a little bit, but that was my first computer. And I love to take it apart, figure out how it works, working through all the various softwares, and just really it's always been in the computers. But around 2000, I graduated, became a graduate, as a graduate residence hall director. It was right around HTML was starting to come out, and nobody was really, we just didn't have the money for technology, I think, in student affairs, and probably still don't, but back then we certainly didn't. And so I taught myself HTML. I hired a student employee to help me with that, and I built probably one of the first online residence life communities. It was like an open forum, and in my residence hall that I was running as a grad hall director, we used that as a way to connect with one another beyond just what was happening in the halls. Nobody had a phone to look at. I mean, in fact, if you did, it was definitely a flip phone. I don't even know. Maybe it was a bag phone back there. I can't even remember. It's definitely, I'm around long enough to know when the internet started. And I was born in the 1900s, if anybody's on the call that knows what that means. It makes me older. But then I kind of go into this, from there, I got into this social media leadership. And what ended up happening here was we had a situation at NKU. I was associate director of residence life at the time, and we were dealing with conduct. And a staff member came in and said, "Hey, somebody has a keg of beer that they took a picture of and used it as a profile in Facebook. What do you want to do?" And I didn't know what Facebook was at the time, but I said, "Well, can you see who they are?" "Yeah." I said, "Can you see that they were in our building?" "Yeah." I said, "Well, bring them in for a conduct hearing. Let's just go ahead and do that." And lo and behold, never had any idea it could lead to this, but no lie, I get a call after doing a student newspaper article about this because we just went ahead and made the decision. I didn't think it was anything national precedent setting, but turns out I get a call and it was Wall Street Journal, and they said, my assistant said, "Hey, Pete, someone's on the phone for you from the Journal," and I'm like, they probably. So those newspapers we never give out to students, they never pick up. I'm like, "I'll pick it up." And they're like, "Hi, Mr. Trentacoste, I was wondering if we could ask you a few questions about Facebook." And I was like, so that was a little weird. And then from there, got a call from Rolling Stone. They wanted to do an interview about Facebook, digital management. So just wild to think career-wise to kind of have those kind of moments. Did a lot on that, got into presenting on helicopter parents and kind of the tech stuff there. I started moving more towards a paperless stuff in 2010 to 20. Really had this model of trying to get away from all paper, if all possible. Um, Looking at ways to get residential management software going. We were early adopters in there at some of the camps I was at. And then also was one of the first RFP writers for doing campus retention. At the time, there's certainly a lot of them today, but there weren't a lot back then. And we were looking for someone to come in and help us with that. So we did that. And then kind of led us right into where we are today. Like I've done some presentations already. I've worked with Hot Topics or Paperclip, as they were formerly known, and did a session for them. I have another one coming up in April. Wrote an article for the Talking Stick, and I've been working with my staff recently to kind of talk about ways that this can really help, and doing kind of a dog and pony show on campus and kind of showing the way in which you can get this in the various areas of your work. So first, it's important for me to kind of show what can we do with this thing? I mean, AI is exciting, and there's all the stuff that you do, but it's like, is there something that you can actually do that's, that you can demonstrate? So well, the first thing I thought of is like, I'm a musician. That's the other thing I do in my spare time. And I haven't been able to play in a long time because I'm busy. I got 3 kids, run a very large housing program. I'm finishing up my dissertation. I've got some estate management. I'm an administrator for my sister, unfortunately passed away a few months ago, so I'm administrator for her estate. I sleep very little, but when I do want to work on some things and kind of have some artistic expression, a program out there that I've fallen in love with is this program called Suno. And so with Suno, I kind of prepped some things just kind of to save us some time. So I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time. If we had more time, I'd have you like give me some things about, what might be some of the things we want AI to write some lyrics about. But I had to kind of preemptively do that. And so this is really kind of the viewpoint of a hall director. And then since I'm from Louisiana now, I wanted to make sure it kind of fits some of the profile, what we might do here in Louisiana. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to create, and you'll kind of see it kind of show up here on the right. And then we'll play through what AI can do. In terms of a full-fledged, you could even do orchestra if you want, but this is really going to be more in the blues kind of things. Unfortunately, it didn't. I forgot to put down here that I wanted to put a title, but I could change that here in a sec. Say 3 a.m. blues while it's doing that. And then in a second here, we'll kind of see it probably, yeah, just about done here. And I'm on a subscription right now, but you don't even need a subscription to use some of the models on this if you want to play around. Let's say you had to design something for somebody, back in the day, we used to always do these various songs when I lived on campus. And, we'd spend hours on this stuff. And literally here within basically a couple minutes, we can have AI kind of craft something that actually is like production worthy. It's actually taking a little longer today than normal, but let me try this one here. Yeah. All right, a little bluesy there. It's 3 a.m. again. A little slow draw. Phone's glowing like a warning light. Another night in the hall. Phone buzz rattling on that old wood stand. Half a dream, half a nightmare, trying to understand. All right, so I'm gonna play the whole. Got a resident crying. Sales all gone wrong. I'll go ahead and send that. Well, hold on, got to turn that off there. Before the second ring is gone. All right, get out of that and go ahead and go back to the session. Just kind of a quick way to show some of the power that this thing can do. I mean, here's some of the things I had to do as blues songwriter, context, and we'll talk about the RCO model that I want to share with you all here soon. Context, what it was, the objective, and then the input I built in ChatGPT. I just basically gave it, it actually knows our field quite well. So do most of the models. So if you go in there and just say, I'm a student affairs professional, or I'm looking for something related to housing, obviously I could be a little bit more specific because of some of my background in music. So I kind of picked a specific style that I wanted it to do. And then it just kind of got rolling. Song created. So just one example of because to me, AI is not just a help in your professional life. There's a lot of application. And I'll talk about that. It's kind of one of my last slides in terms of the way I feel AI has augmented my life to make it better. And so with that, we'll go on to the next slide here. So a couple of things about AI. So I think there's three things that I think I want you to come away with in terms of philosophy of how I approach this. One, I think there's a lot of controversy out there, particularly in our field, when it comes to the environmental impact of AI. And so before I even get into the pillars, I want to kind of give this disclaimer. I'm not up here to say that AI doesn't use resources. I'm not here to say that AI might not potentially take jobs at some point. We really don't know. What I am going to tell you is that the time to be on the show, on the sidelines and not do AI has passed. It's here. It's smart. It's getting smarter by the day. And there will be a time in the next year or two, you will be able to remember this because it'll happen, that AI for the first time will surpass humans as the smartest thing that exists on the planet. It will happen within 2 years, no longer. I only know that will happen because AI basically doubles every 4 months in terms of its intelligence. And I've been studying this for the last 3 years. And so when I started working with Gemini, for instance, Gemini tested, there's a program, there's a test out there called Human's Last Exam. You can Google it, or ask AI if you prefer. And it basically is one of, multiple areas of intelligence. You'd have to be a super intelligent person to actually do well in this exam. Most humans probably get in the 5 to 10 percentile. AI, when it gets to 100%, it's kind of what they call the, what's it called? Singularity, where it will be the smartest thing that is non-living, but yet will be smarter than any human being. And AI was scoring about 2 years ago, probably in that 5 to 10% rate. Gemini recently just scored 48%, and that's within 2 years. And every time I look at the scores, they go up, and they all are leapfrogging each other just a little bit more. So the ability for that is that, I go back to the starting the middle pillar here. This is right in front of me. I'm a big believer in AI augmenting us as humans as opposed to substituting us. There's nothing that gets around true human judgment and the ability for us to sign off on things, but AI tools should enhance our experience. I'm a big believer. I love Anthropic and what they're doing. I feel, this is obviously could be politically sticky to say, but I feel like there needs to be regulations. Some people will disagree. If you don't have regulations on where that goes, it starts to cause challenges. Like I was worried about, one of the things out there is kind of like it's kind of funny, but it's kind of not because it could be the end of humanity. People were like, somebody asked a question once, is Terminator 2 movie, for those that maybe have seen it, is that a movie or is that a documentary? The hope is it's a movie. It's not a documentary because if the AI is like Skynet, we're all in trouble. But the problem is that without regulations, what starts to happen is you start to lose the ability to hold people to account for decisions that are made. If AI is truly autonomous, it can do things that are very harmful to humans. And then the person that created it can say, I don't know. Claude decided to do that. ChatGPT did that. I had no idea it was going to go in there and do that and make that happen to that person. That's truly terrifying and why we need absolutely to continue to push. And I think that Claude and Anthropic have done a great job by stepping away and saying, we're not going to do that. I don't know the deal ChatGPT signed or, the owner OpenAI has signed, but I think it's worth being concerned that the government was saying we need to do this. And they said, we'll sign the next day after Claude went out. Thriving in gray space. So student affairs, going back to pillar one, I feel like we're so good at this. This is something that, we've navigated some crazy things in profession. COVID was absolutely insane. I joked once at a conference that, housing professionals did so much work. We literally should have come back to campuses and had a ticker tape parade for the heroics that we demonstrated during that time. None of that happened, of course. We just came back to work and everybody else was like, oh, it was great to have all that time off. And all the housing people were like, are you kidding me? Like, really? So, reality is that we've been in these spaces that are really difficult and hard and sometimes ambiguous. And AI certainly is in that. But gray areas to me become opportunities for learning and opportunities for us to be, leveraging our ability to make AI be a tool for resilience. And one of the things that's been true about housing, and this is part of my dissertation work, is looking at the live-in experience, and particularly student housing experience, for decades. You can go back to the ACUHO-I literature and research it. We have been talking about how we grind people up, spit them out. There's never enough time. There's too much challenge. There's too much work, not enough staff. For the first time, this presents itself as something that could take away some burdens, not the kind of stuff that we're really good at and we should be doing ourselves, like working with students, supporting students and staff, that are in crisis and doing those kind of things. But the administrivia that we do, that's just over the years has gotten insane. AI is absolutely going to be equipped in such a way that will help to reduce that burden. Does that mean you cannot look at it and just assume that it's got it right? Absolutely not. But I know, for instance, for myself, I had to come up with a performa, and I asked a program Perplexity to build a performa off somebody that had done one that, quite honestly, wasn't really much more than a budget, and I needed to have a multi-year performa. And Perplexity was able to not only read the Excel document, but redo the whole thing. And with about 10 minutes of edits, I had a very powerful working performa that did everything it was supposed to do. And that probably would have taken me a couple of days of my time to do it. And AI sliced through it in about 5 minutes and was very, very effective. And we'll talk a little bit about one of the other concerns that I'm sure will be out there, and certainly something we need to talk about is personal identifiable information and making sure we're not sharing things inappropriately and things like that. But there's ways to do that and still get to the bottom line of trying to get ourselves help and in many ways help us be augmented in a way that can really make us truly, in my view, one of the strongest administrations on a college campus. Because I think that housing tends to jump into these things fast, and I think we're well equipped to kind of get ready for it. But the last part is this mantle of discernment. And so I get into this of like, I'm going to critique us a little bit because I have been guilty of this. I use the middle quote here, meme science. We sometimes get memes on Facebook, and it's like, oh my God, did you hear? Da, 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 da. What I love about AI, especially those that don't have necessarily a bend towards a certain politic, is that it can slice and dice memes. You could screenshot it, send it to AI, and say, this feels like I'm missing facts. Give me a refereed, meaning peer-reviewed, thought on this scientific thing that they're claiming. And almost 10 out of 10 times, I've never had one where it's actually not given me some level of bias that's come through to kind of help me be more discerning of what I'm doing. Good example. So to the environmental impact, and do your own research, because this is what I'm not going to take a stand and say that this is fact, because maybe, perhaps it didn't come through. But I was sharing right when I was getting on the call that, like, I know early on there's a lot of environmental concern about AI. I think that will largely start to dissipate as we start getting to more efficient models. But there's no doubt it has an energy effect, it has a water effect. But what I was told when some people, it uses an entire bottle of water for every prompt. There is not one scientific journal or fact that I could find out there that makes that. Now, does it use a couple drops, maybe a drop or two of water? Sure. And you add all the prompts together, that's a lot of water. A lot of, many, many gallons, tens of thousands, sure. But I just think when we're having arguments or we're having conversations or we believe that we can't do this or this is completely against my morals and ethics, we need to make sure that we're not doing meme science and we're actually doing the research. And I think AI can actually help for that, which obviously you got to discern for yourself whether this is where you want to be. But I'm a big believer that we are heading into this fast, and it's not going to be something that's going to be avoidable for much longer. Kind of like the internet or a phone. Like, I know there was one point I lived in a time where there was no phone. And I thought, I don't want a phone. I don't want to be found. Well, that kind of went away, and you really didn't have that option anymore. And I feel like AI is kind of the same thing. So if you're joining me today and you really like this is truly the first time you're really thinking about jumping in to AI, I congratulate you on that, because I do think that there's a lot of value that you can get, and sometimes you don't even need to pay for it. So some of the things, we have all these various things, and I've hit on this a little bit already, but our cognitive load and what we deal with, no matter what part of the organization you're in, whether you're the executive director or whether you're an RA, I feel like the workload and the cognitive load is insane. It takes a special, sometimes strange, I call myself strange, at least, person that loves this work. Like, I couldn't think of doing anything else other than student housing. This is what I love to do. That said, it is an odd thing that we do. And we shift between, like, 1 minute I'm in a construction meeting, next thing I'm talking about an RA that might need to be let go because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. You may have some parent that's at a level 10 we need to work on, and you send a vendor statement of workout. I need to write a report for my vice president. I have someone coming in crying in my office because they're burned out. There's mental health crisis going on. People are tired. Like, there's all this stuff that we deal with. And so I position AI as maybe a help to some of this, particularly on the administrative side. So embracing this augmented reality, and talking about what an AI shield could be. As you look, this here, this is human. That's what we get to do. we really, need to remember that's what we are not going to turn to AI for. But this over here, do we need to have somebody that does scheduling? Like, I've always been amazed. There are some folks out there that their only job is to look at someone's Outlook calendar. How is that a full-time job? I mean, even as a president, like, I don't understand how for decades we have had that as a job. Like, Outlook is supposed to just, you set up a meeting, but yet we don't have that in higher ed. It's fascinating to me. This will be one of the first jobs that disappears, in my opinion. We will start to see these start to go away, and AI will actually function in lieu of this. Doesn't mean these folks won't have work, but they're going to have different work. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing with some of this, because I think that the world is absolutely changing with some of this. Okay. So the digital intern roster. So I call these my interns. Oh, geez, how do I get rid of that fun little annotation? That's neat. Is that still showing? I think it's still showing up. Let me go ahead and stop this real quick and then come back to it. Maybe that'll reset it. Sorry about that. There we go. All right, so I'm not going to use that annotation button unless I really know what I'm doing. Maybe I'll ask AI later how to do that right. So these are the interns that I think are out there that you need to really start thinking about. There are hundreds of AIs that you can consider, and they're all large language models. And there's a thing called agency, which we're not going to get into today, but I'll briefly mention that agency is really where it starts to get exciting and also scary in terms of what it's able to do. It starts to become a little bit more autonomous and being able to make decisions. But when I look at these interns, these are kind of how I see them. So Gemini, truly for me at this point, is my number one. I use it almost 90% of anything that I'm asking. It goes to Gemini first. Claude is kind of what I'm looking at for reasoning. Nuances, if I'm wanting to interpret policy, I want it to write as human as possible. It works really well in that way. ChatGPT is very good for brainstorming. It can be looking at trading themes, empathetic emails. The other thing I find that they are best at, now Gemini has what's called Nano Banana. But ChatGPT's graphic, while it takes a little more time, I find that the quality of its graphic design right now is the best model that's out there. That could change tomorrow, but for today, if I want something really highly polished, I'll compare the two, but ChatGPT usually wins in terms of how good it does. Perplexity. So this is one you may not have heard, but it's one you need to think about. This to me is one of the most exciting ones out there. Now, the cool thing is Perplexity is a little bit of an anomaly, because it allows you to choose other models. So it has its own model, which I believe is called Sonar. That's the general one that it uses. But you can use ChatGPT. You could ask Claude or Anthropic, which is the company that runs Claude, Gemini, or you could even use Grok. Now, Grok's not on here. And Grok's kind of a little controversial because, its owner is a controversial dude, and Elon Musk. I don't put it on here because honestly, the reliability I started out with Grok. I will admit that when these LLMs here were not as strong as Grok in the beginning of the AI stuff. Grok was honestly starting to knock it out of the park pretty early. And compared to ChatGPT, I felt that it was one of the few that allowed you to really do deep research without so many restrictions. Like sometimes ChatGPT would say like, I'm sorry, I'm not really able to write on that. I'm like, what is this? Are we having restrictions? Is this like, are you the knowledge police? Like, let's just be able to ask what we want to ask. And Grok, of course, the claim back then was that's what they were to do. All of them have had certain limitations that have come on them, including Grok, and some of Grok's have been downright scary. So I don't use that model personally, but I understand that some folks, it's definitely in Teslas, it's the fundamental, connection with X, and it is coming up pretty good, but just know that that's why it's not up here for me. I don't use it as one of my 5. For Perplexity, you could use it if you want to check and not have to actually have a restriction. This is the one that you may not have heard of, and honestly, I only found it about 6 months ago, and it's been a game changer. So Notebook LM is a part of Google, it's Gemini driven, but it's a separate little software, that runs, and you can upload up to 50 documents into various notebooks. And then Ask Notebooks is like a finite version of AI. So it could be things that you have in your department. So let's say you have a ton of manuals and you want to write a training session on like what to do. You could go into Notebook LM, ask it to design an outline for you. And then not only that, but in the studio, click presentation, and it'll immediately start making a presentation. Click infographic, it'll design an amazing infographic. If you've not played around Notebook LM, there's one thing you leave with today. Please try that out. It's really amazing. All right, so the housing ecosystem, kind of talked about this already, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here in the interest of time, so we make sure we have time for questions at the end. I do want to talk about, though, the RCO model. So this is when you're building a prompt, this is how you should be thinking about any prompt that you're looking to build. So, and if you don't know what a prompt is, kind of going backwards, I know I may have some folks on here for the first time, and you're like, okay, I don't even know what AI is. Like I had somebody tell me, they're like, I know we talk about AI all the time, but I've never actually been in AI. And so that's important to think about. Like not everybody is, you can absolutely avoid it. You don't have to be in it. AI could be this nebulous thing on the side. But when you actually get into it, you do need to think about how to write a prompt. Because the more specific you are, the better high fidelity output you get. So you're going to tell it what you want it to be. So for instance, if I need something that I really want it to be specific and expert, I will say, you're the best real estate agent in the country. Here's my property that I'm running. I'm looking to sell. I want to move houses, and I need you to give me the best comparables you can possibly do. My context is I'm looking to sell it. I need you to give me the comparables, and then my objective, the tone, I need this to be written within, and you give it the constraints now. Like I want it to be written in less than 2 paragraphs because I'm going to be turning this over to my real estate agent. And that will get you a finite and more narrow and polished thing. And a lot of times when you come on the roll, AI kind of gets like hyped up. It's like, yeah, I'm the best at real estate. It's kind of like there's this little hype thing right after someone's like, yeah, all right, give me that. Like I want to see you. Like, show me now. And sometimes the other thing, I go back and forth with AI, it'll give me something. I'm like, I am somewhat kind. I do say please and thank you, which some people say you don't have to waste characters. I don't believe in that. Again, if AI does go south and it goes against us, I do want him to give me a little bit more time. Like, hey, I was the one that said please, thank you. Remember that. Hopefully get a little bit more positive reaction on that. But at the end of the day, like this is just important to kind of think RCO in terms of how you do these things. So prompt engineering, it's not just good communication. Again, help me with student orientation, not specific, very, very vague, but professional. Create a 3-day orientation schedule for 200 incoming freshmen that includes academic sessions, social sessions, activities, campus resource tours, includes timing, location, and staff assignments. You give it some of the things that back that up, you will be blown away by the result that you get from this. Thing you need to remember, you don't have to be an IT expert, you're not a coder. You're just learning how to describe what you want so that it understands what you're asking for. And a lot of times you have to go back and forth, do a couple of these to make it work, but it can go and make it happen. So here's the one in action. So product. You get a level 10 parent. Someone writes you and they're really upset. Role, act as a compassionate firm executive director of his life. I'm dealing with a level 10 parent regarding AC repair. It's going to take 3 days to get this part in. Objective, rewrite the aggressive email into a calm response, validates their frustration, outlines technical timeline, and the result. It'll kick something out just like this. And then, you can even like, the other thing I find too is like, what I use AI for a lot of times, like my brain is processing really fast, but I don't have a cohesive way to describe it. I could just literally like vomit out the words to AI and say, I want it to look like this, and I want to say something like that. Help. And then all of a sudden, magically, it starts to give me a response. And if it sounds too, the other thing I could do too is I hate M dashes. It's one of the tells, quote unquote, of AI. So in the background of mine, I often tell it not to use M dashes and other typical AI driven language and to be more like the way in which I tend to communicate. I've even given it some samples of my writing so that it actually sounds as bad as I do in my normal writing as opposed to AI language. But at least gets it down to where you have this processing in a way that allows you to rewrite things and get the help that you might need. So ways to kind of other areas that this might work. So friction to flow map. So res ed and conduct, unkind but not policy, roommate conflict. Throw it through the AI filter, drafts message, just validating discomfort, explaining interpersonal policy versus inviting them to mediation. And I could go through all this, but certainly I'll send you this slide deck will be at the end as there'll be a QR code for you to download it. And I know ACUHO-I will also send this out as well. So I'm not going to go walk through each one of these, but there are certainly a couple examples hidden here, and I have some others that I'd love to share with you guys if we have time. But one of the things that's important is this, which I wanted to kind of get to, which is this idea of cleansing the data a little bit. So you never want to use PII in an AI prompt. You protect the student, you protect the institution. So when you're going to give this information over, the first thing to remember is on the bottom right here, you see a temporary chat hack. Always toggle that. That way it doesn't go into the AI memory. So if you happen to put something in there errantly, it's not necessarily in there as somebody's personal information. So it's good to kind of go through, copy it to like a Word doc. I'll go in and remove names. I might just say student A, student B, copy and paste a very difficult scenario into whatever, again, John Smith, a very just made up name. I kind of you do a find and replace with some other way to do it, just to kind of get the tone and the message for how you want to get something conveyed. I'm always amazed because AI often is very affirming. It'll be like, wow, this is a really complicated situation. I'm sorry you're having to deal with this. I'm like, thank you. I do think my work is really complicated and concerning. Like, so it always is affirming. I'm like, I wonder if other professions get that. I think they do, but I think you'll find that you'll get that a lot. And it's like, my gosh, yeah, thanks for telling me what I already know. Like, it is complicated. And that's why I'm turning to you for a little bit of help. So know when to step in. Like, why AI, when is it human only? So for AI, yes, routine tasks, drafting emails, summarizing reports, facility audits, formatting data. Your role in that's still the final proofreading. AI used to hallucinate terribly. It's gotten much better at it. It also had bad spelling. The spelling's much better too. However, it's never okay to take what you get, spit out, and send it on over. If you're really tired, another hack you could do if you're really like, like my presentation, like I'll be honest, I was working on this. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of text on this. I just want to make sure it's not a lot of spelling. I sent it as a PDF. I sent it over to a competitor in ChatGPT. I was like, do a deep dive into this. Make sure there's no spelling issues on this. It found one little issue. And it was like, otherwise, your presentation is really well written. Thank you. You can go ahead and tell your competitor Notebook LM that it was put together well. I mean, again, like I said, I drafted the outline for all of what you're seeing. The AI itself actually built all of the graphical stuff that you're seeing here and kind of the layout. So the next thing, AI prep only, conduct discipline, draft a confrontational opening statement for a meeting. So you're certainly not going to be in there using AI working with the students. But as you're preparing for a meeting with conduct, like I find sometimes they're so complicated, you're like, I don't even know where to begin. This can help you sometimes, helping you think about where to begin. The last part, the red light, human only. It can research resources, but crisis response really demands us to be there. And I don't know about you, but I find this to be the most exhausting thing. It just takes one bad crisis to throw our whole week off. Beautiful thing about where I see AI taking capacity up in the other areas is it starts to allow us to have that capacity to deal with the craziness, the drama, the stuff that just derails our week. It requires emotional regulation from us and active listening, and we got to be there. AI is never going to replace that aspect of what we do. Couple of things here also, like, we talked about the level 10 buffer, the accountability reframing. You find that folks get into the various things like you can, and AI is really good at discerning language. So as you start getting these kind of things, sometimes it's hard to even think about how do I begin to respond to this. And you could even say, like, I'm afraid with this parent that if I say it this way, that they're just going to go down this other rabbit hole. And it'll give you some feedback on that. And I find that, just trusting your gut is the first thing, but then second, using this to kind of polish up that final result can be really helpful. The other hack to think about is kind of facilities logistics for anybody that might be on the call that works in facilities. For facility audit synthesizer, you can speak as you're walking through notes directly in your phone, instantly categorize that raw audio into immediate safety issues, cosmetic repairs, long-term capital project tables. Notebook alone would be amazing for doing facility work. You just go ahead and tell it what you want. You can paste data in there, you can upload data, you can record data into it. There's a lot of different ways to use that particular LLM. And then proactive work order updates. I mean, this is one that I think, someone at the end of the call, like or at the end of the line in terms of like updating student, it can be really difficult when they're like, I'm waiting on a response. Where are we with this? Just helping get some of those boilerplate messages. AI can do a great job in helping with that. Here's one that I really love. Screenshot the calendar. So and again, no one, this is one of those I just kind of like, a lot of times how some of these came to life for me is I was like, I wonder if I could do this. And I just do it. And then it figures it out. And so with this is like, I was on a Zoom call once and somebody put up a bunch of dates. And I was like, oh man, I really love to have this on my calendar. And I wonder if I could just take a screenshot of it. And I said to ChatGPT, I was like, take this. And if you didn't know this, ICS is a file that connects into Outlook. I said, turn it into an ICS file that I can just import into Outlook. And within seconds, it was like, here you go. So I downloaded it. Boom. All those dates I want to remember all on my calendar. Didn't have to sit there and like go to each date, type them all in, or worse, have somebody that's only job is doing calendar, hand it to them and say, can you put these in? AI could do it for you. Is it programming, wellness themes, whatever you need to do in terms of coming up with a calendar? It can really prompt this in a fully paced academic calendar in minutes. And then kind of coming up with like at a prompt, like a week at a glance, what newsletter, eliminating kind of, what do you need to remember for the week? All of your notes can be synthesized. If you're not using a transcriber in meetings, one, check the rules of your campus. Are you allowed to record in meetings without providing notice? Sometimes people get a little weird on Zoom and Teams calls, but honestly, like when I'm on with a lot of the vendors, I'm doing a lot of construction projects. I use a program called Transcriptor with a K in the middle, and it's $10 a month, and it has an agent that I literally invite to the meeting. So it'll be like Pete's transcriber is there, and they just let them come in, and it sits there silently and just records, and then when it's done, puts together a whole summary of everything. And if it's done on Zoom or Teams, not only does it do a summary, it actually knows who's speaking when and actually puts it like Pete said, da, 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 da. And I have a script of like, I want to know what are the action items that came out of this meeting? What are the things that are still left undone? What decisions were made? And so I have kind of like a template that I give it in terms of how I want it to give it to me, the various summaries. And it takes better notes than I ever could, or somebody that was there that's their only job. So protect the human-only zone. Accountability loop, all AI is a draft, signature decision are 100% human. Back to what I said about my concern with truly autonomous AI. Somebody's responsible at the end of the day. And if you're sending this, you can't just be like, oh, my bad. I used Gemini for that, and I didn't catch it. It was from your inbox, or it's your decision that you communicated. You got to own that. And so it can help you. It's just like any other advisor. Back to the intern thing. Like there are times you've used interns' work and gone out there, or a staff member that works with you, and that suddenly becomes your work as you go out there to present. It's no different. It's just now it's actually faster and doesn't actually exploit another individual. It's just exploiting the technology that's available to you. So things that, the reading of tension in a room, emotional regulation and how to carry yourself. I think AI is coming on to be believable as a human, pretending to be a human, but it's not quite there yet. What's the difference between a policy violation and cry for help? Making equitable judgments based on institutional culture. Like we certainly wouldn't hand over the conduct process to AI is a great example. So for student affairs or just housing in general, these are the 6 things I think that I'd recommend to you today to make sure that you focus. First, prompt engineering. I didn't give you a whole lot of how to work on prompts because all you need to do for any of these, pick your favorite LLM. Maybe you're a ChatGPT person. Maybe you like Gemini. Maybe it's Anthropic and Claude. And just say, for your software, give me examples. Tell it as many as you want. Give me 20 examples in student affairs or specifically to housing and crisis management, and how I could develop prompts that would help my daily work. And within minutes, maybe seconds, it'll give you that. On top of that, you can say, actually, can you go ahead and create that and put that in a Word document for me? Sure, it'll do that. Or can I export that into Google Docs? If you're in Gemini already, you can just literally click the right button with the little ellipse and say, create doc. Or, because it's connected with Notebook LM, move it down and then say, move it to this notebook in Notebook LM. So super slick if you're working with Gemini. I hadn't said this yet, but if I had to pick, because at the end of the day, if you remember, for those of you that might be as old as I am, back in the day when the HTML world came out and we had search engines, there was Yahoo, there was Alta Vista, there was Metacrawler, there was all these crazy things. And then all of a sudden Google came along and I was like, that's cool. And then it just kind of steamrolling. And then they came out with Chrome. And then there was like all these Google devices. And before you know it, Google became the main owner. I think consolidation right now, unless something fundamentally changes, I think that if you had to pick a winning horse right now, it's probably going to be Google. They understand that AI is replacing their their search engine revenue, and they know that the stakes are high. And so they just signed a deal with not too long ago with Apple. And so your iPhone next month will get an update from for Siri. It'll finally not be terrible. I have an iPhone, so I speak as an owner myself because my whole family loves iPhone, and I have one. I've tried to leave, and it's like I'm brought right back. But Siri has been absolutely horrible considering how good AI has caught on. They've kind of just thrown in the towel, like we're done. We're going to actually just go with Google. Now, since Google's already the focus of Android, now you have Android and iOS being under the same AI. That's fundamentally a game changer in terms of who's going to actually have the niche. And because ChatGPT kind of did their political thing with the government and people have en masse unsubscribed, I suspect that Gemini is going to pull ahead in that race. Claude is someone I would also watch second. Perplexity is one I'm not sure where they'll end up. I still like Perplexity a lot as I describe them, but I don't know that they're not gonna have the same market share that Gemini does. So back to this. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I threw that out there because I think that if you're going to invest time and learn one, Gemini is probably the one I'd recommend among all else right now. AI workflow, connect existing calendars. This is where Gemini flourishes. If you happen to be a campus that uses Gmail, oh my gosh, I can only imagine how cool that would be to have it connect with your email. We don't have that here. It's Outlook, and Outlook is locked down, so we can't really do some of the cool things you could do with Gemini that way. Multimodal AI, this just means that you can give it a prompt, and most are multimodal. Gemini is, ChatGPT is, some of the other ones. When it first came on, it would be like, I only do images. I only do research. Well, now you could do image research with all the things at the same time through the same prompt. And so that's where understanding what multimodal is and how to utilize it best. Um, how to integrate tools. So whether it's Google Workplace, Microsoft 365, considering doing voice AI and content creation, I didn't even get into it. Like Suno is kind of fun to play around with, but there are actual places you can give your voice and then you can just type in a script and you don't even need to actually do the training. You give it a PowerPoint deck, it'll just get rolling. And it's actually quite scary. If you've not played around with the program Sora, download that for video creation, and you'll see the scariness of your likeness and how easy it can recreate you. What blew me away about Sora, I think, is the fact that it makes you say like two sentences, not even. It makes you move your head to the left and to the right, and I think up. And based on that, it recreates your likeness. And I won't say all the videos are perfect, but oh my gosh, some of them are, if you just say at and then your handle, it will create something that will really be quite scary. So that's certainly another area that, again, on the dark side, we have to be worried about what that could mean for us in the conduct side for sure. But this last one is probably the most critical, staying current. I swear to you today, and I know this is coming, a lot of people are kind of sleeping on AI right now. They just think that AI is a passing pad. Some of you even called it MOOCs. I will tell you that is not the case. It's going to have a huge ripple impact into our work. And unfortunately, even when it's not ready, there will be some that will use it to replace people in positions. It's going to happen. Just reality. I am a believer that staying ahead of the curve is always important. And the more you can be familiar, the more you can be conversational around AI issues and what it can and can't do, the better you're going to be prepared for what might come. Because I see a lot of people that, even just because of higher ed, the downturn and some of the challenges with funding and the enrollment cliff and everything. I mean, I see a lot of sad folks out there that have been laid off. And it can happen to anybody, but at the end of the day, it tends not to happen to folks as much when folks are current and they're kind of thinking forward, thinking about where we're heading. And I really believe fundamentally this is going to be a part of almost anything and everything we do. So how do you get there? First thing is start small. So first is adopt, and kind of a three-word model here: adopt, adapt, adapt. So start small, low risk, high impact administrative pain points. Pilot maybe an email draft or meeting summaries with enthusiastic early adopter. Adapt. How do you get workflows that fit your process and student needs? What are you allowed to do? Sometimes there's limits on what your campus wants you to do. Is there an AI policy? If there's not, perhaps I recommend you try to volunteer to help be a part of a committee on campus to do that. Because I do think it's important that you kind of know what you're allowed to do. And then last, build culture. Like, what is the team culture around this? We're going to be doing a lunch and learn here in our department fairly soon. And not for me to get up there and, and kind of like speak about what I know. To me, like I can learn so much from so many other people. And everybody has a different little hack or something that's helped them really open up something that maybe they weren't able to do before. And so there's learning that can happen on all sides of this. So capacity recaptured, and that's what I think is just a huge and why this is so important. All this stuff on the left, nobody really gets excited about taking notes. Maybe you do, but I know I certainly don't. I love getting really well written notes. I love doing policy benchmarking this way. Again, you got to double check. Sometimes it doesn't capture it right. Writing letters and make sure they're empathetic. Like, you could toil over these things, or you could just have AI really help you. Particularly Claude is one of the best writers when it comes to those kind of things. So to me, my quote here, AI does not depersonalize student services, in my opinion. It's the exact tool we need to personalize them at scale. By giving it the administrative lift, we buy back capacity to be fully present when it matters most. So the student in crisis, that to me is where we need to be. That's the high impact. And unfortunately, or fortunately, because I think that there's obviously job security in this, um, our students more and more present with challenges more than they ever have. Like I often will say, like when I was a hall director, it's not what our hall directors deal with today. And so it's important for us to remember that. So a couple of things before we kind of we're winding down here to the end, and then obviously look at the chat and see what question I might be able to answer in maybe the last 10 minutes. But here's how AI, as I reflect over the last probably year, how it's really helped me. So first one is personal resilience and advocacy. So my wife is a cancer thriver. Um, I am not just willing to take what the doctors say because the reality is doctors are just high-powered troubleshooters, and the reality is even troubleshooters need more help. So we do our own research, not in a sense of like I did my own research, I'm not going to take a shot. People can make their own opinions on that. I'm not saying that, but the reality is there's a lot of literature out there, and AI can slice and dice medical literature down to patient level better than anything I've ever come across. And so you can actually ask it to write it in a way that you can understand it and talk about it with your doctor and make sure you're getting the best advocacy possible. As I mentioned, unfortunately, I lost my sister and my father not too long ago. I've had a lot of the state administration. I was kind of cast into that role, not wanting to be there, but I am. And as an administrator, there's a lot that goes with that. And though I have attorneys that kind of help me with this as part of my team, there's a lot of things I don't want to turn to them for. In the middle of the night, I have a thought. AI has been amazing at kind of helping me navigate that and have that prepared. Anything I'm wanting to research, AI has been there. But then really the middle one's what I've enjoyed, probably where it's really kind of coming into practice. So my daughter is a engineering major and construction management now, specifically. But she's always been in 3D printing. And I always kind of admired that. And I was like, that'd be fun. But I had no idea where to begin. And what she had, it was really complicated. And I was like, I just don't know that I can really, like, I have the time to learn it. And through AI, not only did I get good at it, like I'm probably more towards the advanced level at this point, designing my own products, reverse engineering stuff that I need to fix around the house. I grew up in a household that no one was an auto person at all, but auto repair is expensive. And so I'm pretty handy. And so I literally now know all the ins and outs of a car through working through AI. I can identify it by taking a picture and say, what is this? What's this sound? What does this maybe potentially be? And I've been able to do some of my own repair work that way. I talked about music already. Another one that's fun is like you can find a program out there. It's called PhotoMyne, Myne. It's a paid product, but it's simply amazing in terms of take a picture of an old photo, tell it to rework it. There's various things you can do to really upgrade the quality. You can also do it directly by just giving a prompt to ChatGPT, which is slower. So you got to go one by one. And then productivity. I walk every morning, get about 2 or 3 miles in. I'm usually always sending various requests to the various digital interns. My staff get random emails sometimes at like 5, 6 in the morning, because that's when I do some of my thinking, and I do it in stride with this. 1,000-page documents. We've got big legal documents here that are really hard to understand. It's just slice and dice that really easy. The last thing I'll leave you with on that, in terms of productivity, is what I love is if I have to defend something, I like writing in a scholarly way. I'm a doctoral student, but I don't have time to write a white paper all the time on everything. In minutes, on the way to a meeting, I can actually have an APA defensible paper and benchmarking prepared using the literature of the field. Very powerful stuff to be thinking about. So what I tell you, your next step before we get to questions is, and this, I'll leave this QR code up. for the presentation is automate the predictable to predict your unpredictable. And I thank you for your time. And with that, I will look at the chat and see what questions we might have.
Pete, this was great. And please put any questions or use cases in the chat or in the Q&A. I will say I pulled up, I gave this a spin last week, and for my prompt, I asked for a 15-minute a day plan to work on my email box that had
Nice.
700 plus emails. And so it gave me a plan on how to reduce that number in 15-minute increments over several weeks. So I'll let you know at Campus Home Live if
Awesome. Yeah.
if I did it. It's not at that point, it's not the AI and it's more the end user.
And so, Dave, I see in here you have M365 CoPilot. Honestly, it could be getting better. I just haven't done a whole lot with it. I'll have to check it out again. We are a Microsoft 365 campus as well. My challenge is just that I really wanted to be able to get in my Outlook and be able to kind of synthesize, and it just hasn't been able to do that. And so that's a really big limitation, at least here. Maybe other campuses don't have it. Maybe they allow it. We've been using a program here called Glean, Glean, and I've been an early adopter of it. And it's been okay, but the cost is in the neighborhood of $35 per user per month. I did not know that. And when I signed up for the pilot, I was like, oh, it's cool. Campus must have an enterprise license. And then I tried to sign some more people up, and they said, what's your departmental code? I was like, for what? And they were like, well, this is what it costs per user per month. And I was like, oh, on second thought, there's a lot better AI programs out there. It does have a sandbox environment, which allows the campus to control the security a little better. So that's why we're a really strong secure campus. And so I understand why our IT love it. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't getting me what I needed mostly. So I've kind of just gotten along for that.
We have something. Oh,
CDs.
CE, I do CE, I do them in batches once per month. And so I am working on those this Friday. So anything that took place in March will go out at the end of the month. So thank you for the question. So Pete, I have a question on something you said that I think is very important in general, but particularly on this topic, and it's to stay current. Um,
Yep.
where do you go to stay current? Are there
Yeah, it's a great
podcasts
question.
or
Yep.
blogs or sites that you feel like really kind of has the pulse on what is current?
So there's a couple out there, and I'll have to go into my inbox to figure out what they were. But I signed up early on for kind of like some of these folks out there that do like a newsletter, and usually they're driven by some kind of ad revenue, but they kind of get the snippets of AI work, and they kind of like send you what's happened, and it's a daily on, they kind of send you kind of this the snapshot of what it is. But really, an easier way to get to that that I use a lot is Perplexity, and particularly in Perplexity, their news feed. So you could tell Perplexity the kind of news that you're into. And what I like about Perplexity News is it creates a AI generated summary, and it pulls multiple sources. So the beauty of that is, I just think we're in a time that we need to have hyper awareness about bias and the reality of why is this being conveyed to me in this way? And is this all true, or is there something in here that maybe is um, they're trying to make me believe this when reality is maybe the facts don't line up with this. Perplexity kind of takes most of that nonsense out. And when you present something like, for instance, like, and I'll just pick on the two polarizing ones. So like on the left, probably CNN or Huffington Post. And on the right, we got Fox News and maybe Breitbart and whatever else. So if you're in either one of those camps and you send someone an article to the other side, like, hey, liberal friend, here's something, and it's a Breitbart link, you're gonna be like, oh my God, I'm not gonna read this. Um, and so it's one of those things of like, but with Perplexity, it takes all of that out of there. It might use one of those as a resource, but it's going to get to the core of the information. It's shareable, but it's actually backed up by all of the various accounts of that particular news story. And so for me, I almost always use Perplexity now for all my updates, and I have AI as a feed that goes into there. And so there are several ways. If you Google Perplexity, there's usually some deals out there where you can get a full year for a lot less than what it normally goes for. but you just have to Google that. There's some various resellers out there that are selling annual subscriptions for Perplexity that I've been able to take advantage of. Big fan of Perplexity for my news feed. So that's the first one I'd say. But there's also definitely some general newsletters out there that you can find if you Google them. Just say AI news, and some of them will come up.
Dave has some ideas for from their campus that I'm going to list because I think this is great. The Division of Student Affairs Technology team has been doing a webinar series to have various student affairs staff highlight how they're leveraging AI tools in their work. I think that's fantastic. That is, again, learning from others, but also making sure as a division it sounds like there's some comprehensive both learning and how you're going to move forward, which is great. Second, in our housing department, we have an AI steering committee, and Dave is helping lead that. And handful of staff from various units in housing that have a premium version of the tools to discuss how to leverage and use it as a department going forward. So I think that's great. Pete, do you have any other suggestions on how both a division level, but then also a department level, that groups could start to really approach utilizing AI?
Yeah, I think, it's really personal. Like I don't want to tell somebody you have to use this, you have to use that. 'Cause the other question that comes in is like, well, can we get the department to sponsor our AI subscription? And that gets hard because it's easy for me. I often say like when you're the director of the department, you're generally the highest paid individual in the unit. So for me to be like, well, I pay for it. That doesn't those words don't fall very very well, and I understand why. But I do think that it gets hard. We're not quite at a point yet where I think we're willing to say this is what you need to do. So I think Microsoft 365 and using CoPilot, if it's available to you, it's free. So you might as well use it. Gemini, the premium one for it, I think generally runs, you can find discounts for about $10 a month. People pay for Netflix, and to me, like this kills Netflix in terms of its ability and utility for helping you on your work. This morning, I actually had one of the AIs help me rebalance my retirement portfolio. Just not performing where I wanted to. So I literally exported everything out of TIA Craft, and gave it my concern of what happened to me several years ago where I lost a lot of money. And I was like, I think I'm being too conservative. And it gave me a lot of great advice. And all it costs is my subscription. And so again, I'll use a couple others because I'm not just going to take that at face value. But when you sit down with people, this is where the challenge for AI is coming in. I think the other thing to think about, which I haven't mentioned, but it's important to say, for the first time in history of the United States, there's a technology coming out that's going to be replacing the white collar individuals before it touches the blue collar. We've never fundamentally experienced that. Nobody actually knows what happens when that actually becomes the thing. For the longest time, you come to replace a blue collar person with the Industrial Revolution. It's like, oh, I guess I'll just go to school and I'll get some more learning. Well, when learning becomes so, not necessary that you can get it in your pocket for anything you want to know about, I think we have ourselves in a bit of a conundrum. And again, I don't think any of us really know exactly in a crystal ball what's going to come. But I think it's absolutely critical that we start thinking about that fundamental shift that's coming. AI can replace white collar jobs easier than it can blue collar jobs for the first time. So what are the things that we're really good at? To me, I think, and this, and I see we're winding down on time, I think that student affairs for the longest time has been fundamentally put kind of in a corner. And it's been said like, well, you guys are kind of the lagniappe, as we say here, the extra in Louisiana. It's a French term we throw around a lot. Um, I think that we're going to be moved more center because learning can be done and teaching can be done in a way that will be fundamentally able to scale to the individual's needs. That's going to be hard to match from a human perspective. But the empathy, the care, the crisis management that we do, and the work that is really human based, I don't think is ever going away. And that's where I think we need to continue to lean into. So for a while, we were kind of like, oh, we got to be about learning. We can't be about student development and about crisis. We need to go back to some of the fundamentals in higher ed student affairs and college housing. That's our safe space where we're fundamentally needed. And I don't think that's going to change. I think if anything, we have more of a need than ever. So I know we're probably right at time. I don't know if there's any other
Yes,
questions,
we have
but
we have one question
yeah,
that then we can use to wrap this up. We
yeah,
see a lot of students submitting responses that are highly AI
yeah.
created. Any recommendations on how to reduce the level of AI in these types of processes?
Yeah, I think, just telling students that you're going to run it through an AI checker and a legit checker, it's hard to find one right now. But also at the same time, I think we need to ask ourselves a different question. Fundamentally, when you go out there to do anything as an individual, like when you have to calculate something, are you doing that by hand because you just want to prove to everybody that you can do it? Like no one's doing that. They're using Excel, they're using a calculator. Same thing with writing to me. Like if a student's actually writing the response, they had to put something in it of themselves. That's my hope, is that I see their spirit and their thinking, and they're leveraging AI as a tool. So I don't worry so much about AI replacing some of that. I think that we need to stop getting so upset over it, quite frankly. I think it's just fundamentally coming into the space. Now, if it's slop, which is something that you'll see, AI slop is described a lot, I think it's different. If it's really not, they didn't even take the time to read it, it doesn't make sense. That's one thing. But if it's highly curated and it's done in an intentional way, I just really think that we're being too ivory towerish at this point with AI. And I worry that honestly the tower will come down if we're not too careful. And so it's something we just got to be fundamentally thinking about as campuses, and not thinking that we somehow are better than what some of the students are into. Are they cheating? Yes. We got to hold them accountable. Yes. But it depends on what you're doing. Like unless you specifically say do not use AI to write your RA application, then why are you holding them to account for it? Would be my question. Like, I think you need to make it clear if that's something you really value and you don't want them using any AI tool, then say it. But otherwise, it's a leg up. It's something to help that student become better, and a way for them to, they're going to be using it in the workplace. No one is going to say, use a calculator, don't use Excel. They're going to be like, how good are you at Excel? Oh, you're an expert user at it? Great, we'd like to hire you. My daughter has been trained on a lot of products all of a sudden. And as an intern, she's making something like $24 an hour in her first internship. And I couldn't be prouder of her. And it's like, she did that through all this work, and it's not her own work. It's just she got the training to understand how to work these tools. And it's the same thing with AI. And I think that those that use it and end up using it well are going to have really great careers, and other people will unfortunately be left behind.
All right, promise. Last question,
Yeah.
and it can be brief.
Sure.
How do you ensure the accuracy of AI?
Great
Speaking of
question.
slop,
Yeah.
how do you double check your work?
That's a great question. I use other AIs, honestly, to work against each other. They love to find errors in their competitor's product, but will begrudgingly admit when it's done well. And so I'll say this came from Notebook LM, ChatGPT. Tell me what's wrong with it. And it gave me a ton of grammatical things that I'm like, I don't care about any of that. And then it was like, bottom line, there's one spelling error, which is all I asked to do in the first place. I was like, I don't want to worry about all the phrasing. I don't have time for any of that today. I just need to know if anything's spelled wrong, because AI is sometimes bad at spelling, and I hate when it spells wrong. And so you can use AI to work against each other, or you just take the time, excuse me, to work through it yourself. This might take you a little longer, but fundamentally, again, whatever you submit is your work. And so if you're going to put your name behind it, you want to make sure that it's accurate. That's important.
All right, well, as we close out today, Pete, I can't thank you enough for sharing your knowledge with us, for giving us, I think, great places, and more importantly, very tangible, kind of bite-sized ways to start to learn more about AI for those of us that are still somewhat new to it, but also about the possibilities for the future. So thank you. Thank all of you for that attended, for your questions, and we will send out a recording of this program. And so have a great rest of your week and great rest of the semester. Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. Take care.